Welcome to 12 Hours in the Future with Maria Sanchir, and we have a really great treat for you today. As a filmmaker in the making myself, I'm a huge fan of podcast called Real Blend. For those who don't know, you should look for it everywhere the podcast is available and on YouTube. Today, my guest is managing director of Cinema Blend, writer, film critic, Sean O'Connell. I am thrilled to have you with me today. You're just my third guest, and I'm so thankful that you trusted me enough to say yes for my
Oh,
invitation.
sure. I'm so happy to be here. You've been so supportive of our show. I can't thank you enough for listening and for interacting with us.
Thank
And it's great. We want to be an interactive type program, where we can go back and forth with the people who listen to us, and we're all just sort of, film nerds sharing our passion for films. So it's great to talk to you.
Right. Yeah, and I want to say to people who have listened to my podcast before, I usually host my podcast from home back in Ulaanbaatar, the capital city of Mongolia. But today, I want to say thank you to all the people who helped me, and I am in New York City on the campus of one of the senior colleges of Senior University of New York, Lehman College. So in the professional podcast booth room. Sorry, I was told to say room. Okay, so I want to start from the beginning. As a fan, I know that you have started to write about films in 1999.
Mhm.
So my question is, why do you write about films? Why did you decide to write about films? Did you like see some kind of film that made you fall in love with writing about specifically films, not anything else, as a journalist?
Sure. No, I was always growing up a film lover. I went to everything new. As soon as it hit theaters, I went out to go see whatever it was. It didn't matter. Um, I'm a story junkie at heart. So I read a lot, but my favorite medium is film, and it always has been. And then we had video stores in my hometown growing up where I just would rent, everything under the sun. And there was a lady who worked in that video store who was instrumental in handing me so many different titles, whether they were westerns or musicals or horror films. She made me watch everything, and she just kept recommending titles to me, and I absorbed it all. So it wasn't until I got to college that you're starting to explore what you want to do and what you might be capable of doing when someone suggested to me, because I was always one of those people that could sit around and talk about film, for a long period of time, whether it was, trying to figure out why we loved certain movies or just, being passionate about the movies that really moved us, that somebody said, oh, you really should look into writing about films in some way, shape, or form. And I started to explore how you even make that into a career, because I kind of realized that there are people that do it. So there has to be some sort of path, to allow you to become a film journalist. I had no clue how to do it, but that was sort of the light bulb moment when a friend of mine said to me, you really should look into writing about films as a career. And then that set me down this path.
Right. 20 over years, two books down,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. It's worked out okay.
Oh, yeah. Uh, so I'm curious about, especially because of my subject that I studied film, what do you look into when you're reviewing films? For example, what I mean is when you watch a film, like obviously on a big screen, it's hard to take notes or anything like that. And you have to write about it almost right away. And do you
Mm.
have like certain technique, or do you see like narrative or the character arc or like camera work, or what's
So I do bring notes. I bring a notebook with me, and I take scratchy notes in the dark. And I've gotten good at doing that over the years.
right?
In the best case scenario, the movie is so good that you get swept up in it that you're not noticing all of those things.
For sure.
I think, and that's rare. I think that's really rare, because your brain has been trained to look for, really unique camera angles, or a performance in particular that's working really well. And so you start to make note of that. It's hard because ultimately you're trying to make a snap judgment about whether you liked something or didn't like something, right? Like that's the be all and end all. Did you like it or not like it? And then you got to go the extra step and explain why, you felt the one way or the other. And you have to sort of personally explain how come it didn't work for you in that moment.
Right.
But we've talked a lot about on the podcast how your opinion of film can and should change over the years, because of it's really hard, that in the moment when you're sitting down to watch that film, there's so many factors that play into, where you are in that moment that could affect how you are experiencing a particular film. Imagine being a filmmaker who spends 2 to 3 years pouring their heart into a film, and the day you're going over to see it, you're in a car accident, a fender bender, and it puts you in a terrible mood. So when you go in, you have no interest in that film and your mind is distracted and you come out and you write a terrible review. Well, that's not fair, but it's where you were in the moment. And so that's why I think film criticism can be really difficult. And so I think it's best to really give the person as much of a picture as you could of, here's where I am at this stage of the game. This is how I interacted with this movie. It might be different for you, but this is what I saw, and this is what I think people are going to get out of it.
Right. Interesting. But I absolutely agree. The mood certainly gives you the thing. Because sometimes if I'm in a bad mood, I try not to watch very heavy stuff, for example. Like I know it's gonna like take me a week to recover or something like that. So somebody said, I don't remember who was that exactly, but somebody said that Hollywood produces about 1,500 films a year.
Okay.
And I remember hearing Ridley Scott saying about that it's about 1,000 too much. Would you agree?
Oh, interesting.
Why or why not?
I don't know if I agree with that necessarily, because of that 1,000, there could be 5 to 10 masterpieces that you might not have if they weren't given a chance to tell their story. And in fact, maybe I'm putting words in Ridley's mouth, but I think what he means is films that go to theaters, like they should be reserved for specific types of movies that go to theaters. Right. And maybe he's right about that. But I think with the advent of streaming and the way that other filmmakers can get their stories out, and the way that they can tell the stories that they want to tell, like who's to say that of the 1,000 ones that don't get made, that one of them isn't the best movie you've ever seen in your entire life that you wouldn't have had access to if this filmmaker didn't get a chance to put that movie together. So no, I never do. I don't think we should be denying anybody the chance to make their movie. Right. But just because you got the chance doesn't mean that your movie is necessarily worth making. That's the complication.
Sure. It doesn't mean that somebody needs to see it at all.
Sure. And sometimes it's just, for you personally, it's the idea of making the movie that you set out to make. Let's say a filmmaker makes 1 to 2 movies in their entire career. That could be the goal that they set out to make, and they accomplished it. And there's something very rewarding about that. And I think that should be celebrated.
Yeah, then that's why we are doing this, right? I mean, film. So I wanted to ask about the beginning of The Real Blend. Mm-hmm. Because I'm such a huge fan, I would like to ask you, and for people who don't know, maybe to hear about it, whose idea it was, and what was the process of starting it, and why Jake and Kevin?
So I'll take credit for having the idea. I think the guys would give me credit for having the idea as well too. Cinema Blend, which is the website that I write for, and which sponsors the podcast, we were going through a phase where we were looking for new ideas for podcasts, and so everybody on staff was kind of pitching ideas that they wanted to do. And for a while, we had a podcast called Hero Blend, which was specifically geared towards superhero content, that one of my colleagues, Eric Eisenberg, was running with a girl named Adrienne Jones. And then my idea was just to do, it was very much a casual, turn on the microphones and just have however many groups of friends, however many friends get together and talk about what's happening in movies to this day. And I've known Jake and Kevin for years upon years because we've been doing the junket circuits together. And without, exaggeration, what you hear on the show is very much what the three of us were doing, at these press days, where while we were sitting around waiting for interviews, it was always the three of us and then, then a few other people scattered in who were just sitting around talking about everything that was kind of happening on a day-to-day basis. And so I knew that I had a good rapport with those two anyway. And anytime that we were at a press event, we all sort of gravitated to each other. We knew, oh, I'm going to hang out with Jake and Kevin when we're at so-and-so, or we're going to ride the bus to whatever theater. I'm going to sit near Jake and Kevin because we're going to talk about fill in the blank. And so I think the first idea we had was to do the awards podcast. We called it Awards Blend when we started.
Yeah.
And we were very specifically going to focus on just the Oscar race leading up to it. And it was only going to be a temporary run. It was only going to be a couple episodes. But and initially our biggest concern was just, we won't have time, like everyone's super busy. And when are we going to find the time to sit down and commit? And that's what I think dooms a lot of podcasts, is that people have an idea and they think it's a lot of fun, but they don't realize how much work goes into it and how much you have to carve out time to record. And God bless Gabe for producing the show and putting it together after the fact. Like we don't do, Kevin and Jake and I don't do any of that. We sit down and we record it, and then Gabe makes it all magically work, which is fantastic. So anyone else who's trying to put a podcast together doesn't probably realize how much production goes into it and how much work is done after the fact. So anyway, we had so much fun doing that Awards Blend podcast, and we wanted to commit to doing it on a weekly basis. And then here we are, 200 something episodes into it. It just kind of snowballed into this thing that we all really love doing.
Yeah. Oh my God, the 200th episode. I haven't had so much fun in a really long time, I would say.
Oh, really? Nice.
It was off the charts. It was great. It was crazy. So I wanted to ask about, of course, for those who don't know, Sean wrote 2 books. First one to be release the Snyder Cut and Insider Look at the Lost Justice. I love the title, by the way. Lost Justice is so on point, right, with everything. And the second book is in pre-order now, right, on Amazon.
Correct. It's finished, and it's into my editors right now. So they're going through it with a fine-tooth comb, and they're getting it ready for release, and it comes out in November of this year.
Right. I'm going to link the pre-order link down below. And
Thank you very
for
much.
the first book as well, it's called With Great Power, How Spider-Man Conquered Hollywood During the Golden Age of Comic Book Blockbusters. So tell us about the second book, please.
Sure. Spider-Man has always been my favorite character ever since I was a kid. I collected his comics growing up, and I've been lucky enough to be in a position at a film website or film newspaper back in the day to cover all the different Spider-Man movies as they went through production. So I wanted to sort of trace the history of the character through Hollywood, through the Sam Raimi films and through the Mark Webb films, and currently to what's going on right now, to sort of, put into perspective the journey of this character, but also just the rise of comic book movies in general, and how they are, to me right now, the dominant sort of force in the film industry. For better or for worse. There are a lot of people who don't like these films or think that we should be making more and different films. And it's hard to argue against that. But when the last 2 films, Spider-Man No Way Home and the Batman, are the ones that are dominating and kind of keeping the studios in business, it's hard to argue against this model of comic book adaptations. The larger audiences are finding things to like in it. Now, I do hope ultimately that the studios take those profits and turn them back around into more interesting, adult dramatic fare. I don't know if that's going to be the case. I think a lot of those movies will end up going to streaming.
Sure.
But, that goes a little bit back to the should we be making 1,000 less movies a year? No, I don't think so. I would love to see, some of those profits get recycled down into more interesting ideas, but we'll see. But I've always, listen, I'm an unapologetic fan of comic book movies, and so I'm glad they're successful right now.
I love all the movies. I'm like when people ask me, "What's your favorite movie?" When they hear that I go for like filmmaker, and then I'm like, "There's no." It's like asking which baby is your favorite one, and you have 10. You know, like it's
Sure.
such a funny. So, any thought of writing a book of DC and Marvel together? Maybe.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I would love to. I kind of want to get out of the comic book realm for another book, because I do it so much on a daily basis at Cinema Blend, and then to write a book, it takes so much time. It takes so much time, and it takes a lot of your focus.
Right.
But yeah, if I found the right idea to combine those two together, yeah, absolutely, I would love to do something like that.
I actually want for Real Blind fans probably know this, but I'm really interested. What is the title that you texted that Jake said you have to
No,
write this book?
I can't share that. I'm sorry. I
I'm sure
can't share
everybody's like, we want to know.
it.
So on that note, No Way Home. I cannot
Yes.
just not talk about it. Perfect superhero movie. Yeah. So I wanted to
I
ask you, you had this great post on Instagram
mean,
before you went in. I remember you unfortunately got COVID. You haven't
mm,
been able to see it on the premiere, but you went a week later
mm.
and you posted my most anticipated movie ever question mark. But you
Yeah,
didn't follow up with the post, I mean.
yeah. Well, only because I guess I couldn't believe, as someone who's such a fan of Spider-Man and who's such a fan of those movies in particular, and then had just spent 2 years of my life documenting, the history of that character and those movies, that if you're turning around and telling me now that there's a movie that exists that brings all three of the Spider-Men together, like it's still in my brain should be impossible, right? Like, how can that movie exist? And yet here it was, so I was heading into it with such fear, that it can't live up to the expectations that I have in my own mind. And it exceeded them. It was better than I even dreamed it could possibly be. And so now, soon we're going to have a situation where we're going to own it in our homes, and we can put it on anytime we want to, and just go revisit, the three Spider-Men joining together to fight five of the most iconic villains. And it's remarkable. That's remarkable to me. If you'd gone back and told me as a kid, one day there's going to be a multiverse Spider-Man movie where three different Spider-Men team up in live action, it would melt my face. So
For sure. Now, for me, was the highlight was like, I really didn't expect Charlie Cox to be there, and
oh yeah.
like if I'll rank all the TV series of
Hmm.
Marvel, I know like it's Netflix, of course, Daredevil is Netflix,
Sure.
but if you put them like that's my top, like, and I'm like, I don't know, like I think I almost ugly cried like 3 times.
But what's exciting is that's just scratching the surface of, he's going to get to do so much more. I think that's really exciting. Like we see him, he's in the world now, and so who knows where he could pop up next. And eventually he's going to get his own film potentially, or maybe a Disney Plus show. So I'm thrilled that Charlie Cox is still in the universe and is continuing to play Matt Murdock.
Yeah, so excited. And the Kingpin, like he's like
Good stuff. It's good stuff.
he's so good. Yeah. So I can't wait for the next MCU tier list episode. It was so good.
It's coming up soon. I think we're doing it soon because I know we have an episode towards the end of this month where we don't have a guest. And Gabe said we're going to do the list. We're going to finish off the list.
Oh my God. I just rewatched it last night and I was like laughing all the way through. It was so fun. And I'm so happy that Winter Soldier is on top of the list.
It's fun when we disagree. I've learned that listeners really tend to enjoy when we argue about stuff.
So funny.
So that tends to be a sweet spot for the show.
how Jake goes, like, I'm the youngest in the family, I don't compromise. It's crazy, like, because you don't really expect that.
Right. Yeah. I think what works well about the show is that we all three of us have different personalities and we come from different angles. So no matter who you are listening to it, you're going to side with one of the three of us, in almost all the conversations. And then it's fun to sort of take that person's side and argue against the other two. So it can be pretty enjoyable.
It's like, it's so fun. I don't know, like so many things that are in there is so good. So I want to talk about the Snyder Cut.
Okay.
I cannot also pass by without it. Speaking,
Sure.
you once said on the podcast that the replacement of Zack Snyder was so bizarre because the voices of the directors were so different.
Mhm.
I wanted to ask, let's travel back in time. Let's say
Mhm.
it's time to replace him. The things that happen, and there's no Joss Whedon yet,
Mhm.
and it's up to you. Sean O'Connell is getting the perfect replacement. Who would
Mm. That's a really great question.
Thank you.
That's a really great question. You know who I might have gone for? There's a couple different people you could go for. But at that stage, one of the things that they could have done that might have made more sense is to just bring Patty Jenkins over.
Right.
Like Patty Jenkins was working on her Wonder Woman film at that point, and we all know how good the first Wonder movie was.
Yeah, for sure.
And with the Snyder Cut, we now know how much of it involved the Amazonians and the history of the Mother Box and the amount of things that she could have explored.
Yeah.
So to bring over somebody who was already plugged into that world, who had a working relationship with Zack, I'm sorry, not Joss, with Zack, and Zack went on to produce her 2 Wonder Woman films. That would have made a little bit more sense to me to roll her in. If you wanted to go with somebody else that was completely new, yeah, that's a good question. I'm not quite sure who I would have gone for. I probably would have gone for somebody. Well, it's just Warner Brothers at that time truly wanted to go after the Marvel, template.
Sure.
And so they brought over the guy who did 2 Avengers movies, and they figured take our material and force it into that mold.
Makes sense, right? Sort of.
On paper, yes.
Yeah, on paper.
And yeah, and even at the time, you'd be lying if you said when we all saw the headline, Joss Whedon takes over Justice League, because we didn't know what type of movie Justice League was going to be. I personally, and I know a lot of other people were like, well, that makes sense. He did an ensemble superhero movie, 2 of them.
Right.
It's strange that he did it for Marvel and now he's going to do it for DC, but I guess that makes sense. But for me, I would have probably given it to Patty Jenkins just because of her experience and her already involvement in that universe.
I was thinking, like, I know it's crazy. He's never going to do this, probably, but never say never. David Fincher.
Oh gosh, yes, sure. I would watch that for sure.
or just bringing Christopher Nolan in, because he was the executive producer on all of those films.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, crazier things have happened. Nolan ends up doing a Batman trilogy, so sure, of course he could have.
Yeah, it would have been crazy. So I have the topic of the day today.
Okay.
The Batman.
Yes.
I have a spoiler question for you, but this one's gonna air in 20th of March, so
okay,
people are gonna be relatively, familiar with the film already. So if anyone haven't seen the Batman, the one with the Robert Pattinson, Zoe Kravitz, that just came out, it's your warning. So we see the neighbor of Dana's Riddler.
Right.
I think they put him as unseen Arkham prisoner or something like
that. They did, yes, they did.
Joker, right? Correct?
Yeah, Matt Reeves has said that that's going to be the Joker. But what Matt Reeves said in some interviews is that he's not Joker yet. Oh, okay. He's the character who's going to become Joker.
Great. That was my question.
Yeah. but I don't know what that means. Like I don't know his translation of that, because does that mean that like this character still has to fall into the vat of chemicals, at the Ace Chemical Warehouse?
Yeah.
Or is there some other, trigger that's gonna turn him into Joker? I'm not quite sure. But also, if you look through the slot, and you look at his face, it looked like it had some scar damage or skin tissue damage.
Mhm.
It's hard to see. It's a tiny sliver of a door that we're all trying to interpret through.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't even know. We were talking about this on the most recent show of whether Joker should be the focus of the next movie, or if he should just be used in the grander scheme and maybe become the big focus of the third one. I don't know. I mean, I'm really curious to see what the Joker looks like in this Matt Reeves universe, because it is so realistic, and Penguin didn't look like Danny DeVito. He looked like Penguin. So I'm going to be curious. But yes, that is definitely Joker in that cell.
Yeah, Colin Farrell though. Oh my god. Wow.
Fantastic. I mean, I'm almost convinced that that's not him.
Yeah,
I just don't see him at all in it.
when I was watching, I kept thinking, oh my God, really, what is happening? It was
Yeah.
crazy, right?
And I love John Turturro also. I thought his Carmine Falcone was fantastic.
Yeah. So you think we're heading into the long Halloween?
Probably, unless this was Matt Reeves's adaptation of it. Like it does start on Halloween, so it could be a pretty deliberate one. But we didn't get Calendar Man or anything like that. Some people are suggesting that it could be a tease for Hush to be next, and that there's some deliberate reference to Hush in the movie. I have to go back and see if that's actually the case, but there's different places that you can go.
Yeah, so I think we're running out of time. I
Oh,
have tons more questions.
it went fast. It
Yeah,
went so fast.
but I want to jump into there's like some more Batman questions, but I'll go into the last two. So yesterday, someone tweeted how amazing the Batman movie was, and you retweeted saying, "Now give the Superman this treatment."
Sure.
So ideal case scenario for Sean O'Connell, best director, lead. Which comic would you go with?
I don't know which comic, but I would like a situation where a director is able to plug in and not have to do the origin story in the way that we are now with Batman, right? Like even Man of Steel had to go back to Krypton, had to do, Kansas and all of that. I would love a Superman movie where we just hit the ground running and he's already Superman. And we can spend more time exploring a new villain and a different way to go.
Right.
Because I feel like so many of these movies up to this point have spent a decent amount of time setting up who he is, that I'd almost like, even for Man of Steel, I prefer the back half of it because it's kind of when he's already Superman and embracing it or figuring out at the very least. So this Batman was really exciting because it was year 2, and by the opening of the movie, he's established and he's moving through. I know Matthew Vaughn, who did Kick-Ass and The Kingsman, who has a very electric style of directing action, had a Superman pitch back in the day. I also loved his take on X-Men First Class. So I think that I know he's a comic book fan, and I think he loves the character. I think he'd be really exciting to take on Superman. J.J. Abrams has talked about doing a Superman movie as well too. I would love a director who isn't taking the job because it's a job, but who truly is passionate about the character, and wants to do it right and tell the right kind of story. So I don't know who it is, but I just hope that their pitch sells the studio on their love of Superman and doesn't feel obligated to tie into or connect to a larger universe, is just able to do what the Batman did, which is tell a really strong Superman story.
Right. Yeah. Henry Cavill was great though, I think.
Oh, yes, he was.
It's my best, my favorite for sure.
Big fan. Big fan.
Big fan. So March 17th, I'm sure people don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm talking about Super Awards.
Oh yeah.
Sean O'Connell is Critic Choice board member in charge of Super Awards. People, if don't know what that is, it's awards to recognize people in superhero films, horror films, sci-fi films, and television.
Mhm.
Tell us about that, please.
Sure, I'm really proud about this. It's a new initiative through the Critics' Choice Association. We put on the Critics' Choice Awards every year, and we honor across the board a lot of the films that are in the Oscar race and Golden Globe race and stuff like that. But the Super Awards goes in a different direction, and like you said, honors these types of genre filmmaking, which to me are more popular. They're the films that more people are turning out to go see. Whether it be A Quiet Place Part 2 or Malignant, or on the science fiction side, I'm trying to think of what we recognized. But and on the superhero side, we have Spider-Man No Way Home and The Suicide Squad, and I think that there's a lot of really great work being done in those films, whether it be performances. I know we single out Willem Dafoe for his work as Norman Osborn. I know we single out Margot Robbie for her work as Harley Quinn. And I just think a lot of those performances get overlooked. And so we're only in the second year of the Super Awards, but I hope we continue to grow it out as something that recognizes, and we do televisions as well too. We do film and television, and we specifically focus on those genres. And we've gotten really great feedback from people who have been recognized with nominations, who are just really proud to hear that the work that they're doing is being spotlighted in a show that's giving out awards. Now, listen, it's Hollywood, and who needs another award kind of thing. But any kind of recognition that gets shown on those types of films and those performances and the really hard work that goes into making them, I think is valid. So we're going to be giving them out on March 17th, like you mentioned, the Super Awards, and I hope that this becomes an annual tradition that a lot of people in genre filmmaking look forward to.
Yeah, good luck with that so much. I'm so happy. Like I'm sure it was very difficult to make it happen, right? People will be like, "Oh, what are you doing?"
It's been tough. Because again, like, who needs another award show sort of thing.
Yeah.
But but we all sort of really believe that these are worthy films and television shows to spotlight. So we're going to continue to do it for as long as we can.
Yeah, just look how many people watching it, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Sean, so much for coming to talk to me this episode. I'm so excited, and I'm looking forward for every single episode every week. And I watch you guys religiously, and I hope, for the record, like on the record, I was just gonna say, I hope that Jake and Kevin gonna make it too.
I know. I'll get them back here at some point. Believe me.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
This was a pleasure. Great questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care now.
Take care.
12 Hours in the Future is produced by Jim Carney and Maria Sanchir, with technical help from Curtis Antwi and Daryl Mandiola. Special thanks to Professor Tom O'Hanlon, Dean James Mann, and Magda Soto. The executive producer and host of 12 Hours in the Future is Maria Sanchir. 12 Hours in the Future with Maria Sanchir is a series of conversations recorded by the Bronx Journal Radio through the resources of Lehman College, City University of New York. You can find us everywhere podcasts are available and on YouTube. This show is protected under international copyright and may not be recorded or retransmitted without written consent. Until next time, when we see you 12 hours in the future.